This is Melissa Thomas for Florida National News. We are here in East Orlando for the continuation of our FNN Politics and Power one-on-one interview series with Florida House Representative Carlos Guillermo Smith of District 49. Stay tuned for our one-on-one interview today with him. He'll be discussing the challenges he's currently facing right now, as well as several of the projects that he's currently working on. Thank you so much for taking time out today to do a one-on-one interview with us. Congrats on your election win.
Thank
in
you.
2016.
Appreciate that.
We're going to dive right in. How has the experience been for you since your win?
It's been really exciting. It's been a lot of work. It's certainly been a lot of interacting with constituents, but also with lawmakers up in Tallahassee. I just came back from my first legislative session. Okay. It was a productive one, certainly, but a lot of issues were certainly left on the table unaddressed that everyday Floridians are really, really concerned about. So we definitely have a lot of work to do.
Okay, and kind of illustrate for our audience some of those issues that are still left on the table that you'll be fighting for.
Absolutely. You know, affordable housing is really, really important to the people in House District 49 in East Orlando, as it is to a majority of Floridians. Actually, affordable housing has really slowly become one of the top issues, and it's because we have a problem where state government has not prioritized making sure that people can find places to live at an affordable price as part of the agenda. And unfortunately, just to kind of get into the weeds on policy, there is a fund that the state set up a couple decades ago. It's called the Sadowski Housing Fund. Okay. And unfortunately, in this last legislative session, the legislature swept a majority of that fund, which means that they took the money that was meant to be dedicated to affordable housing under that trust fund, and they instead decided to spend it on other issues, which really, really doesn't help at all. Certainly, healthcare is a top concern of everyday Floridians. Florida is unfortunately one of the states that did not expand Medicaid under the Affordable Care Act. So there's 4 million people who are uninsured. Certainly the federal policy fight that's happening right now is very concerning because another tens of millions of Americans will unfortunately get kicked off of their insurance if that Trump healthcare policy passes. So we're really concerned, but really what is the Democratic message in all this? The Democratic message isn't no to the reforms on health care. It's that in addition to how do we continue to build on and improve the Affordable Care Act. I think one of the core ways that we can do that is to make Medicare for all something that is available to the general public, where everyday people will be able to pay into Medicare and actually get that health care plan as a benefit to themselves.
Given the things that you campaigned on, are there any of those issues that you've been able to already start working on?
Absolutely. You know, there were so many issues that were discussed as part of my campaign. My campaign had a lot to do with fighting for fairness and equality for all people, especially for the LGBTQ community, which still is lacking important protections in our state. It has been about honoring the victims of the tragedy at Pulse with action by enacting common sense gun safety measures that will keep our communities safe from gun violence, and also the issue of making sure that we are making investments in mental health care in the state of Florida. Why? Well, because Florida, unfortunately, is 50th in the nation in funding for mental health care services. Now, one of the bills that I filed this year was an appropriations and budget request to provide additional funding to the PTSD clinic that's at the University of Central Florida. I'm proud to say that that legislation passed, that we secured $2.5 million in additional funding for the PTSD clinic at UCF, which means that they can expand their work to not only treat veterans, which is what their current workload is, but that they can expand their work to also treat survivors and first responders from the tragedy at Pulse who are suffering from PTSD and mental injuries. So that was an important victory. But I also passed my very first bill on the floor of the House, in addition to that appropriations bill, a policy bill, which actually protects greyhound racing dogs from inhumane treatment on the greyhound tracks. A lot of people don't realize that greyhound racing doesn't really happen in other parts of the country. There's 19 greyhound racing tracks still left in the United States. 12 of them are in the state of Florida. I think it's a cruel and inhumane practice, but as long as the industry sticks around, it's important that we ensure that those dogs are treated as fairly and as humanely as possible. My bill would have banned the use of harmful anabolic steroids on those racing dogs. The bill passed off the floor of the House. I was really proud of that moment. Unfortunately, it didn't get across the finish line in the Senate, but there's always next year.
Just for those who are brand new to you, who are learning more about you, what does your district entail? What areas of the state of Florida does your district entail?
So House District 49 is East Orlando. It's entirely within Orange County, and it's really the University of Central Florida and most of the surrounding areas.
Okay.
So in this district, we have a young electorate. I remember the average age of a voter in House District 49 is about 35 years old. I'm very close to that, and also it's a really culturally and ethnically diverse district. A third of this district is Hispanic or Latino, and so there's really a mix of different needs in this community. And I feel like so far that I have been reflective and responsive to those needs, and have always been advocating for our constituents, not just within the district but throughout the state of Florida.
So far, what's been the biggest challenge for you?
The biggest challenge really is the lawmaking process in Tallahassee, because sausage making is a really complicated, convoluted, and gross thing up close, and people always compare lawmaking to sausage making. I take the issue of updating the Florida Civil Rights Act and prohibiting anti-LGBTQ discrimination as the perfect example. This is an issue that we've been fighting for close to a decade. And the reality is that politically, we now have the votes on the floor of the Florida House and the floor of the Florida Senate to pass that bill into law and modernize the Florida Civil Rights Act. Why can't we get it done? Because of the process. Because a handful of Republican leaders in Tallahassee don't want to see the issue move forward, and unfortunately that's gotten in the way. So, politics is politics, but we're going to keep fighting, because that's how we move the ball forward.
Right.
Baby steps sometimes is the way to go to make real progress, because dialogue creates understanding, and from understanding we get acceptance and then action.
Now, given your campaign, which was successful and history-making for you, very historical, speak to someone who is interested in running for or campaigning for the Florida House. What do they need to know?
Well, it is a tough job to be a campaigner on the campaign trail. You have to be able to focus solely on the campaign. I've seen so many candidates fall into the trap, because they're everyday working people, that they have to work their full-time job and be dedicated to that while also campaigning, which is important. But you also have to really do a very important self-analysis before you run for office, which is, do I have time and do I have the bandwidth to be able to focus on campaigning 100% of the time and not be completely consumed with work, because those obligations make a difference, because it means that voters are going to be seeing you more. It means that you're going to be able to spend more time fundraising to get the resources you need to get your message out to voters. But I think at the end of the day, what's important for potential candidates to know about running for office is that you should really speak from the heart and be an authentic candidate and be yourself. That's what voters, what really resonates with voters. It's how you can connect with voters, is by being your open and authentic self. Otherwise, people probably perceive you as reading from a script,
Exactly.
which seems like your typical politician, and a lot of times they tune out. Just be authentic, be real, and you'll get a lot of traction with voters. I think it's important for folks to understand, especially in this challenging political environment now, that it's important to be active, to be out there in the community, to reach out to their state representatives, to reach out to their state senators, to reach out to their member of Congress, and let their voice be heard, because that is the way that we really resist, if you will, some of the policies that we oppose. It's by speaking out and making sure that our elected officials hear from us. So I would encourage people to keep doing that, and that's the way that we're going to see the change that we want.
if people want to get a hold of you or your office, how do they do that? Kind of give our folks the information.
Well, the way that they can reach out and get a hold of me is by calling our legislative office, which is area code 850-717-5049. And any member of our staff can help them set up a meeting if coming in and having a face-to-face meeting with me is something that they like to do. Our door is always open, but also they can follow me on Twitter, which is at Carlos G. Smith. And also they can like me on Facebook, and we have a Facebook page called Representative Carlos Guillermo Smith. I'm really active on social media and really responsive to the messages on there that we receive.
As you've heard from Florida Representative Carlos Guillermo Smith, he's currently working on measures to improve the healthcare situation for his electorate here in Florida. And as you heard, his electorate is much younger and more diverse. Here in East Orlando, which is comprised primarily of the UCF area, primarily Latino voters, and the average age being 35, so the needs are slightly different, and he'll be working hard to maintain those needs and continue to fight, especially for equality and inclusion. And as you've seen in all of our FNN Politics and Power interviews, he provided his contact information, so if you have any issues you want to bring forward to him, by all means do so, as well as hit him up on social media. For us, continue to stick with us for more FNN Politics and Power interviews. This is Melissa Thomas for Florida National News.